One of the things I always tell students is if you enjoy human drama, if you enjoy crazy stories with wild twists and things that are better than you would see in a movie, then be a prosecutor.
Today, Elie Honig teaches at Rutgers University and offers insights as a CNN legal analyst. But before he stood in front of a classroom, he spent 14 years in the dark, rat-infested world of organized crime. As a federal and state prosecutor, Elie successfully prosecuted over 100 members and associates of Cosa Nostra, or, as most of us know it, the Mafia.
But I tried mobsters, made guys, captains, bosses, murder, RICO, primarily Genovese and Gambino family, which is 2 of the 5 families.
His success earned him the nickname Organized Crime's Worst Nightmare. Today, we're peering into the seedy details of 3 of Elie's most notorious cases. I'm Doug Fraser, and this is What We Do, where we'll meet the people behind the most intriguing passions, hobbies, and jobs around the world. Case number 1. We came, we saw, we buried him in the woods.
Here's the deal. So the Genovese family is one of the 5 families of Cosa Nostra, right? The 5 traditional mafia, Italian mafia, New York City-based families. And the Genovese family was known as the Ivy League of the mafia. Now, it's a little bit tongue-in-cheek, but there's some truth to it in that they were the best organized, sort of the savviest, always the hardest for us to penetrate. The legend was no made guy from the Genovese family had ever flipped, and plenty of made guys had flipped from the other families.
As they say, legends never die. Until they do.
What they did was they did a very smart thing. So most of the mob is based in New York and New Jersey. But the Genovese family said, there's profit opportunities in other cities nearby. And for some reason, they decided to set up shop in Springfield, Massachusetts, best known for being the home of the Basketball Hall of Fame. Although, in my mind, best known for a bunch of murders and strip clubs.
To set up shop, the Genovese family sent a captain by the name of Al Bruno.
Big Al. He couldn't look more out of central casting, like big guy, burly guy, slick, overly schmaltzy dress, wore like shades everywhere he went. And he was put in charge of Springfield for the Genovese family. And he was making a mint. He was shaking people down. He was running a gambling operation. He was getting his hooks into legitimate businesses and shaking them down.
Al Bruno was doing well for himself. That is, until the family found out about 2 of his dirty secrets.
One, that he was skimming money. Of course, obviously, these guys they're supposed to send out a certain amount of their profits, but of course they're all thieves, so they all steal from each other. So they found out he was pocketing too much of the money. And B, they found out he was cooperating with the cops. He wasn't fully cooperating, but he was providing some information. As, by the way, I won't say they all do, but many of them do, right? There's full cooperators who fully flip and come on board and go into the WITSEC, which is what the real name for what people call the Witness Protection Program. And then there's guys who sort of feed information here and there, and he was doing that.
What's the point of just giving a little bit of information here and there?
Good question. So a couple things. One, they give information on people who they want to get out of the way, right? If they got a problem forming a rival or someone who's cutting into their trade on let's say the drug trade, although they're not supposed to be doing the drug trade by their own rules, but if they want to see someone get arrested, they can help us, push us along that direction by giving us information. That's the main reason. And the second reason is they think in the back of their head they'll get a little bit of help from us. It doesn't work on the federal level, but on the lower level, like I think your local cops will be more likely to let you go on a minor rap if you're kind of helping them too.
Bad guys tipping off the good guys can work in both of their favors, except when the bad guy's boss finds out. In Al Bruno's case,
he was branded a rat, and so the family put out a hit on him, and it was sanctioned by the boss at the time, this guy Artie Nigro. And Artie Nigro sent word up through this guy Anthony Aralotta, who was a made guy, tough guy, little guy. And Aralotta recruited a couple crazy kids from Springfield, who in turn recruited this. This is why they're stupid, right? The more people that get involved in a hit, the more people there are who can flip.
If the Genovese's family legend of no one ever flipping was simply tarnished by Al Bruno, it was on its way to being executed.
Arulata recruits these two brothers, the Gius brothers, crazy Greek kids, and I'll circle back to them in a minute. And they don't want to do it themselves, but they recruit a guy who they call their cowboy, Frankie Roach. Frankie Roach is this like 6'3", ripped, crazy guy. He's so crazy that the other crazy guys think he's the crazy guy. And they think, they're like, this is the guy, he'll do anything. He'll do anything.
Frankie could never get made because he wasn't Italian. He was half Puerto Rican, half Irish. But even if he could never actually get made, he was out to make a name for himself in Mafia lore.
So they say to Frankie, hey, you're gonna, how do you feel about gunning down Al Bruno? And he's like, sure, just tell me when and where. They get him a gun. He waits for Al Bruno outside. Al had a social club in the middle of downtown Springfield. Al Bruno walks out, broad daylight. Frankie Roach pops out from behind a soda machine, guns him down, shoots him like 8-10 times, including in the balls a bunch of times because Frankie decided he was going to send a message. So kills Al Bruno.
It didn't take long before local investigators had Frankie Roach in their crosshairs. He eventually flipped and gave up everyone involved in the murder. The two Greek brothers, Anthony Arulata, and a few others. And he knew by Mafia code that the boss was also involved.
If the boss does not approve a murder and you do a murder, you will get killed. So what happens next is Anthony Arulata comes in and flips. And now I believe he's the first made guy in the Genovese family, at least in the modern era, to ever flip. And he comes in for his first proffer, which is where these guys have to come in and tell us everything they know. And we give them the whole riot act before they come in. The whole, don't even bother. If you think you're going to come in here and lie, don't even bother. You're just going to make things worse for yourself. The deal is you have to tell us everything you know about whatever we charge you with and everything else. If you're willing to do that, we'll do this. We'll get you a letter at the end of this. You'll get a good break in sentencing. If you're not willing to do this, then let's not waste our time. So Arulata right off the bat goes,
you charged everybody you needed to on the Al Bruno murder. That one's good to go. Oh, and I can tell you where Gary Westerman is.
Now, I don't know who the hell Gary Westerman is, but the agents who are Massachusetts FBI agents, their eyes light up.
As it turns out, Gary Westerman had been missing for 7 years.
He just disappeared off the face of the earth. And Arulata was like, yeah, we killed him too. We buried him in the woods. I can show you where. Do you want me to show you where? And we were like, yes, we do. Westerman was a bad guy. He was hanging out with these guys. And he also was really cooperating with the cops. And so what they did is they lured him into the woods. They told him they were going to rob a drug dealer. And they were going to go to the drug dealer's house, like through a back way that you have to cut through the woods to get to this guy's house. So Westerman was wearing like a ski mask and he had a taser on him and he had gloves and everything. And they all were, but they knew what the plan was. They'd already actually dug a hole for Westerman. And Arulata told us, he goes, we all then, just like we were in the middle of the woods, and me and the two Greek guys that I mentioned before, the Gius brothers, we just turned our guns on him and started shooting him. And we were using 22s. He goes, but the weird thing was he didn't die. He said, like, bullets seemed like they were bouncing off his head. And we were like, what the hell? And so I took a shovel and another guy took the two shovels we'd used to dig the hole, and we cracked him over the head and cracked his skull and killed him. And then we pushed him in the hole and he flopped in head first and we buried him. And we were like, okay, holy shit. You can take a guy out of jail. You can get a judge's order to take a guy out of jail for a day. So the FBI agents, I didn't physically go, but the FBI agents got an order. They took him, they got him in a van. They drove him up to the woods of Agawam, Massachusetts. And Anthony like walked him through the woods and was like looking at different trees and stuff. And he was like, oh, I think it was right around here. So FBI starts searching the area. Sure enough, there's 22 discarded shell casings from 22s all over the place. 7 years later, they're still there, still intact. And they do the dig, and they dig 1 inch at a time. That's the way the FBI does a dig. They get a backhoe, and they dig off 1 layer, 1 inch of dirt at a time, and then they filter it like through a gigantic, like one of those sand, those like sieves kind of things, but a gigantic sieve because there's evidence. And so I still remember getting emails throughout that day from the FBI team, and they were like, okay, 1st inch removed, nothing. 2nd inch removed, nothing. 3rd inch removed, nothing. 4th inch removed, we found what appeared to be 2 sneakers. 5th inch removed, yep, it's 2 Nikes. 6-inch, yep, 2 ankle bones, yep, 2, shin bones and all that. I was like, okay, I think you got him. Basically, just like Anthony said, they had pushed him in head first and then buried him. So he was head down, feet up. 7 years later, they dug up Gary Westerman's body. His Nikes were still intact. We used to joke like Nike should have done like an ad, like how well. Still had the taser, still had the ski mask on him.
When the forensic examiner looked at the body, she confirmed the dent marks in his skull, which appeared to be from bullets. There was also a crack from blunt force trauma, like from a hammer or a shovel. Everything was exactly as Anthony told them.
So we ended up charging both of those murders. Everyone pled except Art. We tried the boss, Artie Nigro. We tried the 2 brothers, Freddie and Ty Gius, the Greek brothers, convicted them all on everything. They all got life sentences. And then the postscript is Whitey Bulger. You know who Whitey Bulger is?
For those of you unfamiliar, Whitey Bulger was a notorious South Boston mobster and FBI informant. His temper and flair for gruesome violence inspired films like Black Mass, which starred Johnny Depp in the lead role.
I was just saying that.
You were just saying gets people sent away. Just saying got me a 9-year stretch in Alcatraz, you understand? So, just saying could get you buried real quick.
Whitey was serving 2 life sentences for 11 murders. In 2018, he was transferred from Florida to Hazleton Penitentiary in West Virginia. It just so happened that Freddie Gius was there as well. Freddie was one of the 2 Greek brothers Elie helped put away on a life sentence. When he heard Whitey was coming to Hazleton, he saw an opportunity.
CBS News has confirmed that famed mob boss James Whitey Bulger has been killed in a West Virginia prison. Bulger had recently moved to the facility. He was one of the FBI's most wanted fugitives for years, until his 2011 arrest in Santa Monica, California.
That morning, like, my phone was blowing up and everyone was like, isn't this your defendant? Isn't this the guy? Isn't this that crazy Greek guy you convicted? And my first reaction was like, wow, I can't believe that. And my second reaction was like, of course it was Freddie. Like, he was one of the craziest MFers I ever convicted. According to the reports, like, strangled and gouged out the eyeballs of Whitey Bulger. He was already doing a life sentence on my case. And like, people said, well, why would he do it? I said, because he enjoys killing, because he's already doing a life sentence. He'd much rather be a jailhouse legend, the guy who kills Whitey Bulger, even if it means he goes to Supermax now. He would wear that as a badge of honor, knowing him. So turns out he's the guy who killed Whitey Bulger.
For most of us, murder is intriguing when it's in a movie or a podcast, but as a real-life experience, we'd avoid it at all costs. But there are some people who aren't like you or me. These people see murder as an open door, a chance to climb the ladder, or in some cases, a way to be remembered as the guy who cut down a legend.
On the one hand, it's a huge rush. It's incredibly exciting. It's just, in a lot of ways, it's like what you see in the movies. It's like A Few Good Men. You have these dramatic moments. On the other hand, it's incredibly exhausting. It's incredibly personally taxing. I mean, I used to lose 10 or 15 pounds during trial. It just takes a toll. And it was hard at home. I had young kids at the time.
To add to the complexity, Elie's wife was, and still is, also a federal prosecutor.
So we would have like overlapping trials. It was like really rough on the home life.
To help their kids understand the good that came from their parents' long hours at work, Elie and his wife told them about their day.
We always took a very open position with our kids, like even when they were young. And so they were always really interested in hearing about our cases. And we would tell it to them pretty much. Like, I was explaining to my 7-year-old son about this hit that the mob put out on Al Bruno and how they gunned him down outside. You know, we always sort of took it head on. And we would explain what a trial was. We would say, so Dad's going to go on trial next week. It'll take about 2 or 3 weeks. And what it means is we arrested a bad guy, and he says he didn't do it, and he's going to try to convince a jury, which is 12 people, that he didn't do it, and we'll try to convince them that he did, and they'll come back and say whether he is guilty or not guilty.
One Thanksgiving, with the relatives gathered around the table,
my wife says to my son, who's probably 6 or 7 at the time, she says, Aaron, tell everyone at the table what a trial is, like wanting to show off that he understands sort of conceptually what a trial is. And I swear to you, this sounds like it's from a bad sitcom, but he goes, a trial is when you don't see mommy or daddy for a long time. Yeah, it was just like a dagger to the parental heart. I'm satisfied to not do them anymore. And also, it's a grind. There's such a roller coaster involved. I mean, there's such sort of elation when you win, although modified a bit because somebody is now being deprived of their liberty for a long time. And if you lose, as I have, it's crushing. I mean, you're although not as crushing as if you're the defendant who loses, but it's a real roller coaster of a job.
Case number 2. Old dog, same tricks.
Long story short, we kind of blew it. I'm brand new to the organized crime unit. My deputy chief calls me into his office and says, hey, I'm going to put you on the Matty Ianello, Ciro Perone case. So these guys were 2 Genovese family powerhouses. Matty was named Matty the horse. He was the boss of the family. Ciro Perone was this like legendary capo. Both of these guys were like 85 years old. When we arrested the case, the New York Daily News or Post, one of the tabloids, ran a cover that said old fellas. And it had pictures of all our like old decrepit guys like walking on walker, like breathing apparatuses. So my deputy chief calls me and he goes, I'm going to put you on this case. He goes, and I was on it, but I'm not going to do it anymore because I have to focus on running the unit. Now, if this had happened a couple years later, my antenna would have been up, because one thing I learned is like, if prosecutors have a case that they think is going to be good or exciting or in the media, like they will miss the birth of a child, they will miss an anniversary, they will miss a funeral to do that case. But if prosecutors have a case that they think sucks, they will find the skimpiest, thinnest excuse to bail out on it. And so I should have immediately been like, wait, hold on a second. What's the catch? The catch was we had a shit case against these guys.
The crux of the case was they'd put a wiretap in their favorite restaurant, Don Pepe's in Ozone Park, Queens. Matty the horse and Ciro Perone ate dinner at the back left table every Tuesday and Thursday night. The problem was the tapes were mostly garbage. You could barely hear them talking over the clang of silverware and the bustle of the restaurant.
"95% of the conversation was about food. 5% was about their business, but it was really hard to hear. And all we really had them on was like loan sharking and gambling, which juries don't really care about. We didn't have any real violence. We didn't have any real, imagine the jury appeal of the case I just told you about versus like, okay, so they were shaking down losers who were running up gambling debts and they were shaking down the butcher at the corner. Like, who cares?
Elie and his team wound up going to trial with Ciro Perone and 3 of his junior members. From the beginning, the case was steeped in disarray.
Because we didn't have enough good stuff, we played 90 different tapes from that restaurant. The jury hated us. They couldn't hear them. They were annoyed. We had nothing, so we showed them everything. And it really backfired.
The jury outright acquitted the 3 junior guys as not guilty, and they hung on Ciro Perone. When Elie talked to the jury afterwards, 10 members wanted to acquit him, and 2 of them wanted to convict him, which rarely happens.
When you get a hung jury, it's usually like 10 or 11 want to convict, and one nut job is like, I don't believe in the cops or something.
Elie's first case was a bust. Presenting the evidence wasn't enough. When you watch a documentary, the filmmaker doesn't just unload hundreds of hours of footage and say, here, watch this. They cut it down to a tight 90-minute story. The same rule applies in court. Elie needed to cut out the fat, using only the best bits to craft a narrative.
So we retried Ciro Perone, and Ciro was this smooth old guy. He would wear like leather blue jackets to court. Like, he was like, I'm not wearing a suit, I'm wearing my cool clothes.
Ciro was confident, as well he should be. He'd avoided any convictions for decades.
His most recent prior conviction was a burglary rap from 1955. So this guy had gone like 60 years without ever getting caught. I mean, it was crazy.
In the courtroom, Elie changed his strategy.
We cut out all the crap. We played, instead of 90 tapes, we played the 10 best tapes where you could actually hear them. We just cut out all the garbage.
The result?
We convicted him in like a day. I mean, the trial was 2 weeks, but the jury was out a day. The first trial took 3 months. The second trial took 2 weeks.
After returning the guilty verdict, the judge dismissed the court for a 5-minute break, including Ciro Perone.
He's 85 years old. Like, this is a chance these are his last moments of freedom in his life. And I go out to use the bathroom, and I come back in, and Ciro's standing there with his lawyer, also like a wannabe mobster. And Ciro goes, he's wearing his blue leather jacket, and he puts out his hand, and he goes, "Hey, kid, no hard feelings. You did a good job." And I was like, all right, thanks. And then I went in, and I said, "Judge, we moved to detain Mr. Perone. He's now being convicted. He no longer has the presumption of innocence."
The judge agreed. At age 90, after serving 5 years in prison, Ciro Perone walked out a free man, only to die a few months later.
As you can maybe tell, I had a begrudging respect for Ciro, and I was kind of glad that he didn't die in jail, because you don't want that.
You might say that no matter how long it takes, justice always prevails. Or does it?
For nearly 3 decades, the name Gotti has been synonymous with organized crime in America. According to the federal government, John Gotti Sr. and later his son, John Jr., ran the Gambino crime family, the largest, most influential mafia family in the country.
Case number 3. Enter the Dragon.
John Gotti Sr. is the crazy one. He was the bloodthirsty, ruthless psychopath who was in the tabloids and sort of became the Hollywood good fella. And when you hear like rappers talking about Gotti, they're talking about the dad. They may not know it, but they're talking about like, I'm a badass. They mean the dad. The son is more like, think Donald Trump Jr. Like, kind of like everyone hated him because he was spoiled and entitled and thought he was hot shit, but didn't really know what he was doing. And even people within the Gambino family hated his guts. They all thought, why does this guy get special treatment? And he was really like a kind of a fake tough guy, but when push comes to shove, he wasn't really a tough guy. That's Junior, okay? But he was still a huge name, and he was the boss when his dad went to jail. His dad had him running things on the street.
Elie's office, the Southern District of New York, tried John Gotti Jr. 3 separate times. Elie was still a newbie at the time, so he watched the case from afar. The prosecutors Elie looked up to and respected did their best, but John Gotti Jr. escaped all 3 trials with hung juries.
And after the third one, the office dismissed the case. You're not going to retry a guy for a 4th time. That's like unheard of. Fast forward 4 or 5 years, and I'm now in organized crime, and I'm becoming sort of the lead guy in organized crime. The Middle District of Florida flips Junior's sort of longtime henchman, and they decide we're going to take a shot at him. And I was dealing with them. Like, they would call me, because I had all the Gambino family cooperators were all my cooperators at this point.
The Middle District of Florida called to ask for transcripts, permission to talk to his cooperators, anything they could get to build a case against John Gotti Jr.
And I was always like, great, yeah, no problem. Good luck, guys. So they arrest Junior in 2009, and I do the bail hearing, because the bail hearing has to be in a district that's adjacent to where the arrest happened. So they bring Junior into the courthouse. I did the bail hearing. It was a total media circus. It was a long, stressful argument, and we win. We get him locked up.
Walking out from the courthouse that day, the media frenzy heightened. Some reporters were sprinting out of the courthouse. The site was on par with the kind of media storms Junior's father was known for decades earlier.
I was like, oh my God, like people are running to file their stories. Like, I didn't realize it was that big of a deal. Turns out it was actually the day that Sully took his plane down on the Hudson River, like a half mile away from the courthouse. That's where they were all running.
Though there were bigger stories in the media that day, Elie was excited to help out with the bail hearing. He wasn't going to bat as a prosecutor, but hey, he was happy to help. And doing so solidified his name in a footnote of Gotti history. But if Elie knows one thing about organized crime, there's often a difference between what you think you know and what's actually going on.
Well, Gotti's first move is to transfer the case from Florida back up to the Southern District of New York, because he lives in New York, his lawyers are in New York, and he wants to get back in front of his same judge where he was 3 times before, where she was really good for him. By the way, to this date, this is the only time I can ever remember that motion being granted. So the judge down there, I remember the FBI agent was down there for the argument, and I was reading on the internet, like, judge seems inclined to move the case to New York. And I was like, no, like, I knew if it came to New York, it was going to land on my plate. And I texted the agent. I was like, Ted, what the fuck? Like, the judge is going to move it up here? And he responds back. He's like, no. I'm in the courtroom right now. She's not moving it. I can tell. I'm good at this. I can read her body language. She's going to keep this case. Don't worry.
2 weeks later, Elie got a text from his FBI friend.
Gotti, coming your way.
Elie's small role in Gotti history turned into leading the charge on the 4th trial of John Gotti Jr.
I thought we were going to get him. I'm like, I was having this insane year. I had like 3 or 4 huge trial wins. I was riding high. I thought I was like the dragon slayer.
The court date quickly came, and Elie's dragon was at his door. The trial was long and exhausting, and revolved around the testimony of the guy flipped by the Middle District of Florida. That guy was John Elie, a former hitman for the Gambino family. His stories led the attack of racketeering and murder conspiracy charges against John Gotti Jr., who didn't take the situation kindly. During the trial, Jr. reportedly mouthed a special message to John Elie: "I'll kill you." The trial slowly drained the clock. Hours turned into days, days to weeks, weeks to months. Finally, in December of 2009, over 3 months after the trial started, it was the jury's turn to deliberate.
Usually a jury will take a few hours, maybe a day or two, and they'll send notes, and you have to go up to the courtroom, and the jury, sometimes the note will be, we have a verdict, but sometimes it'll be, we have a question. And I still remember we were sitting in the trial room for like 8 or 9 days. It was endless. And finally, the court clerk calls us on her phone, and I pick it up, and she goes,
"We have a note."
And I go, "Ooh, is it a verdict? Can you read it?" And she's not supposed to read it, but she did. She goes,
"You want me to?"
And I was like, "Yes, please." She goes,
"The note says we are hopelessly deadlocked. We can't agree on any of these issues. We want to go home. This is over."
I went from like cloud 9, like I'm about to slay the dragon, to like, shit.
At the end, the jury hung 6-6. Elie's dragon had escaped.
So when they hung, I knew we were not going to try him for a 5th time. And when we talked to the jurors, and the 6 who wanted to convict were like, he's totally guilty. But the 6 who didn't were like, he's totally guilty, but you can't try a guy 4 times. That's not fair. What happened to double jeopardy? It's like, oh, that's not what double jeopardy is.
Junior had been locked up for the past year since Elie led the bail hearing. At this point, he knew there was no other choice. They had to let him out.
When you let someone out of jail, the prosecutor has to go down to the clerk's office and sign some paperwork. So by this point, it's like 9 or 10 at night, and I go down to the little clerk's office to sign the paperwork, and John's there with his family. He had 6 kids. I didn't realize at the time there was like a scrum down there, but the media was there. So I signed the papers, and the marshals are there, all the guys who had worked overtime, and I was shaking their hands. I was like, "Thanks, guys. Thanks for working hard on this. Appreciate it." Next thing I know, I'm like face to face with Junior. And I just put out my hand and I shook his hand and I just said, like, "John, best of luck with your family." And I was trying to signal to him, like, we're dismissing this. Like, you don't need to lose sleep. Like, it's over, right? And he was like, "Thanks very much." And then I walked out of there and I was like, oh my God, like FBI agents are never going to talk to me again. Like, what'd I just do? But it turned out like I got a lot of praise for it. Like the New York Times said, like, in a gentlemanly move. And like one of the other papers said, like, in a move befitting his profession, Elie Honig, blah, 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 extended his hand. And I realized, like, it's not about like your ego or your stats or like whether you win or lose. Sometimes it's about a bigger thing. It's about our process and our criminal justice system. And as the judge said to me afterwards, like the judge he did not get the same judge he had before. He had a very hostile to Junior, pro us judge. And the judge said, like, look, like, this is our system and juries are a protection of liberty. And sometimes juries will tell the government, like, no, like, you've gone too far. Like, you can't do this. And so it was a good lesson for me that, like, there's a much bigger picture out there. and a good lesson for me in humility, that it's not about like your stats and do you win and are you the glory boy. It's about like the system, which is bigger than any individual.
After nearly 14 years as a federal and state prosecutor, Elie stepped away to teach law at Rutgers and appear regularly on CNN as a legal analyst.
Do you miss being in the courtroom?
Oddly, no. I think doing media has been a good, what's the word I'm looking for? Like methadone for that.
In Elie's absence, the strife between society's villains and those who pursue them carries on. Some are served justice in the courtroom. Others find it in the suffocating hands of a killer looking to make a name for himself. And the lucky few simply escape. No matter how the stories of organized crime end, each one captivates our collective imagination. They provide a fascinating look into an alternate version of our own lives, one where we wake up with blood on our hands, politicians in our pockets, and our wildest dreams at gunpoint. Hey guys, thanks so much for listening. Would you mind leaving a rating and review for the show? It only takes a moment and it's a huge help. And be sure to subscribe so you don't miss any new episodes. Until next time, stay curious. What We Do is produced by me, Doug Frazier, for WHRO Public Media.